The dollar store always carries super cute, fun window clings that they change out with the season. So today I'm going to share with you a few crafts that I was able to make using fall window clings. First up, I started with this wood round that I got at the craft aisle at the dollar store. I just flipped it over and I used my heat gun to peel off that sticker, and then I also cut off the twine hanger. And then I just grabbed some like mustard yellow craft paint and I painted the entire back surface, not the front surface. I want the smooth back surface yellow. Now this is smaller than a regular door hanger. It's closer to like 8.5 inches in diameter. It's a bit smaller, but we're still going to use it as a door hanger. And so I just painted the whole thing yellow, kind of dry brush, weathered look. And then I also came in with a little bit of white craft paint and a very, very dry brush just to make it look kind of weathered. The reason why I selected yellow was because the background of the window clings that I was using was kind of like an orangish yellow color, so I wanted it to blend in. Then once all of my paint had dried, I came in with some Mod Podge. I used matte Mod Podge and did a solid coat over the entire surface of the door hanger. And then I just grabbed a couple of window clings off this sheet from dollar store and I just smoothed them right down onto the door hanger. So this is like a little wagon filled with pumpkins, and I just used my fingertip to smooth out any air bubbles and make sure that the window cling was nice and adhered to the Mod Podge. And then once I had both of my window clings on the Mod Podge, I then sealed it again with another coat on top. This way, using the matte Mod Podge, it kind of takes some of the shine off those window clings so they're a little bit more matte and don't look like they're window clings. And then I just had a few pieces that hung over the edges, so I used my pen blade, which I will link to in the video description, on a cutting mat, and I just trimmed away any excess. Super easy. And the thing I like about this craft is I was able to stick it into just an evergreen year-round wreath. So instead of having to change out your whole wreath with the season, you can just pop a small door hanger into the wreath and customize it that way. All right, for this next craft, I started with a pickle jar and I just used some hot soapy water to remove the label and clean it up. And then there was some printing on the jar, like with the expiration date. So I just removed that very easily with some nail polish remover and a Q-tip. And then I taped off a section at the bottom of the jar using painter's tape. It's kind of tricky to get the tape completely level all the way around the pickle jar, but I gave it a couple tries and I got it to work. So just secure that painter's tape all the way around the jar. And then instead of using primer, I just used Rust-Oleum plain white chalk paint. I just keep a quart of this in my craft desk and I use it for a million different things. It's the perfect white paint for base coats, for priming, and for craft projects. So I just did one coat of the white paint and then I followed up with a coat of dark green paint. And so I chose dark green to complement my window clings. This is Folk Art matte paint, I believe in the color olive green, but I ended up having to do 2 coats for complete coverage. And while that second coat was still kind of tacky, like it was dry to the touch, but it wasn't completely dry, I peeled off the painter's tape. And that's kind of my trick or my key for getting smooth paint lines. If you let the paint dry completely, you're not going to get as clean of a line as if you remove the tape when the paint is still just a little bit tacky. And then it was time to add my window clings. So I had these are kind of like modern little fall rainbow designs, and they were too tall for my jar because the text wouldn't be able to show up on the green paint. So I cut off the text and I just used the rainbow section. And then I also chose not to Mod Podge the entire jar. I just applied Mod Podge to the back of each individual window cling before I set them in place on the jar. And then I added 3 clings to my jar in total, and then let them Mod Podge dry. And then to finish this off, I wanted to make this into like a lantern. So I pulled out some gold floral wire. You could use silver, but I thought gold kind of went better with the warm fall tones. And I wrapped it around the jar, the top of the jar, I don't know, 10 times, kind of at varying angles. And then you'll see that section of floral wire at the top of the screen there. That's actually 3 sections of floral wire that I braided together to make it a bit thicker. And that's going to serve as the handle to this lantern. So after you go around the top of the jar 10 times, give or take one end of that braid and fold it over a piece of the wire and twist it to secure. And then pull that floral wire around to the other side of the jar. Trim your handle to length and then twist that other end of the braided floral wire around the other side of the wrapped wire. And then continue to wrap your floral wire around the jar a few more times, very tightly, so everything kind of stays in place. And then find the point of the floral wire where you started wrapping around the jar and take your 2 ends and give them a few twists to secure everything in place. And here I have a little modern upcycled fall lantern. All right, for this one, we're going to use the rest of the window clings from my previous craft, and this is less of a craft and more of just like a tip. Dollar Tree sells stemless wine glasses, so if you're going to have a holiday gathering this fall and you don't want to do like wine glass charms or you don't want to write people's names on glasses, what you can do is grab a sheet of smaller window clings and stick the window clings on the outside of the glass. So they're not permanent. You can use them for the day and then peel them off when it's time to wash your glasses, and you can reuse your glasses for other holidays. This is perfect for Thanksgiving, Easter, that type of stuff. Okay, we're gonna make a little rustic wooden craft here now. So Dollar Tree sells these little mini wood plaques here. It's like a little 3 shiplap section thing going on. And then I just took some classic pumpkin window clings and some foliage, and I kind of trimmed them down a little bit. And then I Mod Podged everything in place. So for this, I did a solid coat of Mod Podge on the whole sign. And then I smoothed my window clings into place the way I wanted them. And then the trick here is you don't want to just leave the window cling in place. You want to take a razor blade, or in my case, I used a pen blade, which I will link to below, and I scored along that little seam between the wood slats on my little wood plaque. You have to kind of hold the window cling in place while you do it so it doesn't slide around. But you want to do this while the Mod Podge is still kind of wet. That way, after you cut that score, you can slide the window cling apart just a little bit to match the seams in that wood. And that's how you make it look like this image is printed right on the wood and not like a decal on top of it. And then once that Mod Podge had dried, I flipped my little sign over and I trimmed off any excess window cling pieces. And then I just made a scrappy bow with some burlap ribbon, nothing too fancy, and just hot glued that in place on top of my little sign here. And then the project felt kind of top heavy. So I decided to add some wooden half balls to the bottom of the project. I will link to these little wood beads below. So I just kind of dry fit them in place. I decided to use 7 of them across the bottom of my project. At first, I painted everything like a dark green color and let that dry. Then I just used wood glue to glue those in place. I like using wood glue on this type of thing because with these half wood balls, I like to get the spacing perfectly even. And I can set these in place while the wood glue is still wet and kind of slide them around back and forth to get the spacing just the way I like them. If I used hot glue, I wouldn't be able to do that. And then to just distress it up a little bit, I used some light gray chalk paint on a very, very dry brush. So the tiniest bit of paint, and I just distressed those little half wood balls very lightly. But here's like a classic rustic little mini pumpkin sign, perfect for, tiered trays or smaller decorative areas. And then I saved my most involved project for last. I say involved, not difficult. It's time consuming, but super easy. So grab a muffin tin from Dollar Tree and paint it white. So I did a solid coat of white Rust-Oleum chalk paint on the entire muffin pan. And then from there, I added 2 more coats of folk art home decor chalk paint in the color Sage. Yes, it's called Sage, but it shows up like kind of like a robin's egg. Take it up with deco art, not me. But I just painted 2 coats of that, and the reason why I did that is because my window clings had kind of like a minty green background. And I knew I didn't want to paint my muffin tin like the minty green, but I thought that this sage robin's egg color was close enough that when I put the window cling on it, it would work. So 2 coats of that chalk paint, let everything dry, and then I just used some matte Mod Podge, and I painted only in the bottom of each muffin tin slot. From there, you can just peel off one small window cling. You may have to trim it down to size depending on how big it is, and smooth that right into the bottom of the muffin pan. Repeat that process with all 6 little sections of your muffin pan. And then you can go over the tops of the clings with matte Mod Podge just to take some of the shine off those window clings. And then from here, I wanted this to look more like vintage enamelware. So apparently, I Googled it. There's such a thing as turquoise enamelware, which I didn't know, but I think it looks super cool. I'm also just a big fan of like blues and greens and teals in general. But I just took black chalk paint. This is Deco Art Home Decor chalk paint in rich black, but use whatever black paint you want. I even toyed with the idea of using like a dark brown on this. But and opted for black anyway, but I think dark brown would look really good too. But you can just kind of use your intuition here and just paint along the edges, places where you think this would naturally be worn. So like along the edge of the pan, around the edge of each of the sections of the muffin tin, and then just kind of like some splotches on the surface and on the sides of each tin as well. But that's it, a cute little kitchen craft for fall. Perfect for all of you farmhouse decor lovers out there. But that's it. Those are my fall window cling crafts from Dollar Tree. I do hope you enjoyed watching these tutorials, and I hope this video inspires you to make something of your own. Until next time, happy making.